You guys have had a long week and a long day, so thank you again. For those of you, again, that a lot of you know me because I was at Whittier with you, but for those of you who are newer, I'm Cindy Castell, and I'm now over at the District Administration Building as the Director of Gifted and Advanced Programs. And one of the areas I work with is the PSAT testing. So, just kind of as all of us are helping, Taylor while she's out, I just wanted to be helpful to your team that's already there doing a great job with all of this, and work with you today on some things you need to know. So we'll go ahead and get started. Why do we give the PSAT 8, 9, and 8th grade? That's always a big question. So we use the College Board suite of assessments to help students be prepared for college and career readiness. We changed from the ACT about 4 years ago because College Board did have this suite of assessments. So it's a way for students to kind of track how they're doing. So the suite of assessments is designed to start with a baseline in 8th grade. So that's what they're doing this year. They're just getting, that very baseline to see where they're starting. So students can look, and also teachers can look at areas that students are already doing really well in and areas of growth. So College Board also has connections to Khan Academy for practice. And we use the PSAT scores to also invite students to AP classes once they get to the high school through AP Potential. It'll kind of analyze their scores over the years and give us information to really encourage them to take certain AP classes. So in short, students are more successful in attaining scholarships and other honors due to practice over the years, instead of just taking their college entrance exams when it's time to do that. So testing date this year is next Tuesday, and at Whittier you're going to be starting at 9 and you will be finished by lunchtime. All 8th graders have the opportunity to test on this day, but there's no makeup. So if a student's absent or they come in after we've started testing, then that's the only time they have to take that test. As you talk to your students the next few days about the test, really encourage them not to worry about it, but to really do their best so they can have a reliable baseline to refer to over their next few years. After the tests are scored, the students will receive their scores and their test booklets to go over. So it's another, for students who are really kind of looking at, preparation for college, being able to look at the types of questions that they missed is another great review for them. So we're going to go through today some of your roles as the proctor, and we've got it broken up into 3 sections: before the test, during the test, and after the test. So before the test, I'm going to just really emphasize it's very, very important to read your manual. And the good news about that is you don't have to start on page 1. I think it's actually page 48 where you start. The stuff in the front is for those of us putting out all the test material and getting them out and getting them back to College Board. The other beautiful thing is Cynthia Charbonneau went through and marked all the places you'll need to start and like where you need to skip to, because there's a lot of extra information in there. So as you're reading through those, that's a really nice thing to have. So if you have any questions as you're going through that, be sure to reach out and ask any of us about that. You also have a sheet that Leah sent that has the schedule, it has the room assignments, it has your room code, all of those things on there. And I think she sent those out to you today, but make sure you have that copy with you during testing as well. In your buckets the day of testing, you'll have a calculator policy. That's also on page 111 in your test book. And when students come in with calculators, you'll just need to check them and make sure, basically we're checking to make sure they're not graphing calculators and they don't have a memory storage that has anything in that. So, but that calculator policy is very clearly spelled out. There are some calculators. I had a call from Alcott today and asked about one, and it wasn't on the list of calculators, but it met the requirements. So if you have any like that, you might check with your, math teacher friends to have them verify that if you're not sure. You have a seating chart template that you have to fill out, and the official one is on the back of your coordinator manual. But Mary Rachel also made you a copy of that, so you can kind of do a rough draft if you want to plan ahead. If you don't, then you've got the flexibility to seat students as they're coming in. But you have that rough draft if you do want to kind of get that set up. Leah also created a student slide deck to go over with your students in overtime to kind of, again, let them know what's coming up on Tuesday and what kind of things they need to bring with them. So that'll be something you'll want to do if you haven't done that already with your overtime. And finally, review and complete all items on the checklist before, during, and after testing. I think you got that today. If not, those will also, you'll have one in your test bucket as well. So there's a checklist to kind of help you go through and make sure everything's done. So Leah, Cynthia, Mary Rachel, Liz, do you guys have anything to add on any of those materials?
The only thing I would say is there is an extra sheet that the students are going to get. You might want to be looking at that while you read through your manual, because there are some additional things on there that you won't have in your book, but they'll have.
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. That's when the students are filling out their demographic information, that sheet is behind the answer sheets when you pass those out. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And you might want to even take a look at that too, because there's questions they have to answer on their demographic sheet. Anything else?
Rachel, how many calculators did you get? How many extra ones?
We don't have very many, so we only have, like, if we divvied them up between all the boxes, each class gets like 2. So
okay, so there will be a couple extra calculators in your materials if a student needs one, and if you do let them borrow one, if you'll just make sure to give it back, because the math teachers really need those back.
Okay. And there's, on the math section, they'll have a non-calculator section, and then the calculator section, they'll have to have the calculator off their desk during the non-calculator time.
So the seating chart, that's the copy, it's not already in our manual. Do we need to go get that from the box?
It's on the back of your manual, but the copy's not in there. So
yeah, copies are in your boxes. We can get those to you tomorrow. Would that help?
Sure, or we can come pick them up, either way.
Yeah,
but this is the official one, right?
Right, yeah, and the copies are in your boxes, so yeah.
Can we kind of look through the sticky notes just so because I have some questions. Or are we going to do that later? Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, we're going to go through things. Do we want to wait and do questions at the end?
I know some people are going to have to leave, so maybe if we get through your slides first.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, so again, you're going to begin reading on page 48. So if you want to kind of look through your book on this slide, that might help you look at any questions you have about how they're marked. So you're going to begin reading to students on page 48. And again, Cynthia's marked that so you know exactly where to read and what to do. I'm going to just again emphasize the importance of looking at that before, not just looking at it, but taking some time to go over all of that. It's not fun reading, but I will tell you, College Board is a very, and I put tricky on there, but I'll just tell you they're very difficult to deal with if there's problems. So please make sure that you have read through that and you understand what you're doing before the day of the test. And you can ask, you're welcome to contact me, but Leah, Cynthia, Liz, Mary Rachel, they're all there and they'll be happy to, go through things with you. Also review the schedule and school information that Leah sent you, and Make sure all your materials are covered in the room you're going to be testing in. There can't be any posters that aren't covered on the walls, so you can use butcher paper or newspaper to cover those. If you are filling in for someone, you might check with them and kind of work as a team on some of that pre-work to make sure that's all ready for you that morning when you walk in. The College Board also requires that there's a clock at the front of the room. So if you don't have a clock, you might see if there's some way you can display it on a smart board, or let someone know that you're going to need a clock in there. The day of the test, we will be set up in the counseling office by 8 o'clock. We'll be there a little bit earlier, but we'll have everything ready to go by 8, so you can stop by and pick up your test materials. Once you pick those up, the test security goes from us to you, so you'll want to make sure that those are not left anywhere unattended until you turn them back in right after testing. Okay, so on test day, you're going to greet your students in your testing room. The seating chart is that, most of the time if we're doing a random seating chart, we think about doing an alphabetical order. But College Board's rule is you cannot have any predictable seating, so alphabetical will not work. So you're going to seat your students randomly. You can prepare that ahead of time, and that please note that all seats must be facing forward. That is a College Board rule. Also have all students turn off all electronic devices and place them in backpacks. That would be watches, phones, anything that, computers, those cannot be close to them. And they really need to, make sure that they're turned off before they put them in their backpack so they're not buzzing and stuff during testing as well. And then backpacks should be stored in a designated area in the classroom. Students cannot get in their backpacks until after testing. So if they have water bottles or snacks, you might have them set those out in front of the backpacks so they can have easy access to those.
I think they've been able to keep their water bottles at their desks with them. Is that?
Okay, yeah. I think
Okay.
that's fine as long as it's not going to be a risk to the test material, so they could set them, on the floor and pick them up.
Okay.
Okay. Also, make sure that your students have their home address when they come to test that day. They need an email that's not a school email, so they can use a parent email, or if they want to set up as a family an email that they can receive college information to. The email is actually not required, but it is a great way for them to get feedback from College Board. And then you guys will have pencils in your tubs. They have to be number 2 pencils. They cannot be mechanical. And then they have calculators if they brought one. And again, we're going to check those acceptable calculators. Okay. During the test, your role, you're going to pass out test materials. Those will be booklets, student information directions, and answer sheets. We won't have scrap paper because they will do any kind of, if they're doing math, they can do that in their test booklet. So there won't be any scrap paper to hand out or collect. Remind students to wait for directions. That's going to be very important because we have labels that are made that do a lot of the information. It's actually the information on the front page of the answer document is in the label. So they're going to actually be starting on page 2 of the answer folder with their demographic information. So really encourage them not to start, because a lot of them like to start filling in their names and things that they know. So we don't want them to do that on the front. Have students open the answer document to page 2. And then you're going to follow in your coordinator's manual to walk them through that section. So that's where your directions will start. And that's why Cynthia has a lot of like skip to here stickers in the book, because you won't be doing all of that information since we have the labels. So be sure to read and all the things you're asked to and do the task it asks you to. For example, when you get ready to start the test, it will have you put information up on the board. And that information is in your test directions. So you'll want to have that information where students can see it as you're preparing for that. Also, this is one of those tests that active supervision is expected during all of the tests. So you don't necessarily have to be walking up and down the aisles, but you need to be really watching students. So no books, no being on your computer. College Board is very strict about that. So if we had somebody report that, it could be a problem for the students. Okay, during testing time, remind them there's no electronic devices. And then if they have the little stand up and stretch breaks, there's no discussing the test. That's prohibited. So please follow the testing schedule as closely as possible. I know that was worked through very carefully so that you guys could be on time to lunch. So you'll want to get started as soon as everybody's in the room, and hopefully that's pretty quickly. We won't have any students going to do any pullouts, having special groups or anything, because we don't do accommodations on this test unless they have to do them because of, maybe the student's blind or something. But all students will be testing in the room, so that should go a little bit faster. During the first test, that's a good time for you to walk around and record on the seating chart on the back of your coordinator's manual. And there's directions back there that all the things you should list. It even has you put arrows where how you pass out the materials, like if you go down one row and up the next. So make sure you follow those directions next to the seating chart. Also, if you have any irregularities happen, you'll want to record those and report those by sending it. You can send a text message to, I think Liz and Mary Rachel have their number on your sheet. And especially if you think it's something we need to take care of immediately. But there's also in your testing manual, there's irregularity procedures. So for example, if you have a student pull out a phone during the test, you can look on those irregularity procedures and it will tell you what to do in that situation. So make sure you review those before testing, so you'll kind of know what things would be considered irregularities and how to handle them if it does happen. Okay, and then after the test, we're going to ask students to stay seated and in test mode until all testing materials are collected and accounted for. So first thing, you'll want to make sure all the answer documents are closed back to the first page, and you're going to collect those and then collect the test booklets, because we definitely don't want any answer sheets being returned inside the test booklets. We want them separated. So then once you get those 2 stacks, those will both be alphabetized. And then any unused materials, if you have any students who don't show up, so you have some extra booklets or some extra answer sheets, you can just stack those separately. And then when you come to the counseling center, we'll count those all back in. So we'll count your answer sheets. We'll ask you if you've had any test irregularities. We'll count your test booklets. All of the materials have to be accounted for. Also collect your pencils so that they can use those for the next testing. And then after you have all of that ready, if you'll call in and let the office know you're finished. And then once that's happened, then they'll either move to 5th hour or to lunch, depending on what time it is. Returning the materials. So once the office makes the announcement to move, and you have a chance, if you'll come to the counseling center as soon as possible. I know if you have kids coming to you, you won't be able to do that until they go on. And again, we'll count all of those back in and ask you if you did have an irregularity. We have to make sure that we understand it, so that if anybody calls about it, we have to explain it. So we might ask you a few questions just to make sure we have that clear. Okay, so I did include this slide, and I'm going to send this. Actually, Liz and Leah and Cynthia and Mary Rachel all have access to this slide deck. So if you kind of struggle reading through a manual, You can go to College Board, and then this, the address right here, collegeboard.org/PTAT. It doesn't look like it's right, but that's right. And then it will ask you if you have an account. If you don't, there's a create one button. And then I told Leah I would share the link to the training with her, but it wouldn't let me do that. So this is how you get to that training. But you'll choose all available training. You'll choose PSAT related assessments. And then you're going to have to type in John G. Whittier, and it starts popping up, and you can choose Whittier Middle School. The test date, our original test date, was going to be October 13th, so that's what it has in the system, so you'll have to put that in. And then you can choose PSAT 8-9 and then Proctor as your role. And I went through the coordinator one the other day, and it's basically, it walks you through what's in the manual. And it's kind of like an interactive slide deck that has a little bit of animation and some questions that ask you to see if you understand. So if that's easier for you than doing all the reading, that is available. So that's something, this slide deck is also something that you can have access to so that you can look through any of that information that we went over again. So at this time, are there any questions?
Do any of the brand new teachers have any questions about what kind of things need to be covered, or where you get the butcher paper or anything like that?
I have a lot of newspapers in my classroom if anyone needs. And Cindy, we don't have to cover motivational posters, do we? I think in the past it's just been instructional materials.
If that's what you've done in the past, we'll go with that. I know it just said make sure everything's covered. So, but I think that's
Okay.
definitely
My
need
students covered my
instructional.
black paper today. Is that okay?
Sorry, say again.
I had my students cover my posters with black paper today. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you said that we would get a code, Leah. Is that on something you've shared with us?
Yes.
Room code?
Your code is that 8th grade adjusted schedule. I think it's called PSAT Brainstorm. Maybe I should retitle it. And then it's got the teacher name.
Okay.
It's actually also on that PSAT checklist.
Okay.
And she has copies of those in the bucket as well.
Okay. All right.
And
Just remember-
I put all the PSAT materials for this year in a subfolder in the 8th grade team folder, and I just reshared that because
Okay.
I think I was relying a lot on our Google Classroom last year, and we don't really have anything like that this year. So that folder's been in place a really long time. I just updated that section and reshared it with everyone.
I saw the slideshow that you sent out, Leah. Is there also something going home to the parents from Whittier with what the kids need to bring with them, or do we need to send those out to our individual overtimes?
Brian did send out, there was information in last week's newsletter. Maybe I'll put something in the top, I'll type something in the top of the blast. I think that would be good as a reminder. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. Do we have a location for kids to go who arrive to school late and someone to watch them?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. They'll go to either the front office conference room or the counseling conference room. I don't want to assign teachers to watch them because, you know, we're having to ask teachers to do so many things. So somebody will watch them. I'm hoping there won't be too many.
Yeah, and if we have a whole late bus, we should probably hold. I mean, I think that's why we pushed off the start till 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Because that gives 25 minutes to get settled.
Yeah. And normally if transportation does have a bus running super late, they'll call Jen and she'll let us know.
Okay. Now, is the announcement going to come to go ahead and start then at 9 o'clock, or do we all just go ahead and start at 9? Usually I think there's an announcement that's made.
I don't care. I mean, if you think that would be helpful, we can do that.
I think if, just in case there's any, worry about late buses or anything, but otherwise, I mean, we can just go ahead and say 9 o'clock. We'll, make an announcement so everybody knows, unless something comes up. Anything else? Okay. Well, again, yeah, a team of people working on this. So reach out if you have any questions, and it's pretty self-explanatory once you get going. But College Board does, again, the marked booklet is a big deal because I do add a lot of information that's not always appropriate. So just take time to go through that, and you'll feel really comfortable on the day that the students come in. Okay.
Thanks to Cynthia for marking these books for us. I think that's super helpful.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Well,
And thanks, Cindy, for doing the training. Thanks, Liz, for helping set up, and Mary Rachel.
Thanks, guys.
thank you. Good to see everyone, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.